In the quiet hours of the night, when the stars shimmer like whispers above and the world rests in stillness, there lies a tale, old as memory, wrapped in mist and spoken only in hushes. It begins not with mystery, but with a dream. The year is 1584. Across the wide and restless Atlantic, in the courtly corridors of Elizabethan England, sails unfurl on parchment maps. The world beyond, the new world, beckons like a golden mirage. It is a place of endless forests, winding rivers, and lands unspoiled by European empires, or so the whispers say. And one man listens intently, Sir Walter Raleigh. Elegant, ambitious, and trusted by Queen Elizabeth herself, Raleigh is granted a charter, permission to claim and colonise lands in her name. This charter, sealed with royal approval, stirs the beginnings of what would become the first English attempt to plant permanent roots in America. But this chapter, dear listener, is not only about kings and captains, it is also about those who followed the dream, quietly, bravely, across a sea of unknowable promise. Let your breath grow slow and soft, as we drift back to the gentle lapping of waves against wooden hulls, to the creak of masts and the sigh of wind that once carried adventurers westward from the shores of Plymouth. The first voyage in Raleigh's name set sail in April of that very year, 1584. Captains Philip Amadas and Arthur Barlow lead the way. After weeks adrift, the sea at last opens to green shorelines, to sandy dunes and towering pines, the land we now call North Carolina. Explorers step onto Roanoke Island, and here in the warm embrace of the Outer Banks they are greeted not by silence, but by the Algonquian-speaking tribes, particularly the Secatan people, whose lives had long been woven with this soil, with these waters, with these winds. Relations at first are calm, gifts are exchanged, observations are made, notes written in journals beneath the flickering of lanterns capture this strange and wondrous place, its plants, its people, its potential. England's explorers return home that autumn with tales of mild climate, friendly natives, and fertile land. The Queen is pleased. Sir Walter Raleigh names the land Virginia, in honour of his Virgin Queen. And so begins the dream. The first colony attempts to settle the island in 1585 under the leadership of Sir Richard Grenville. Over 100 men make the journey. But the dream falters. Supplies dwindle. Relations with local tribes grow uneasy. The sea becomes their only lifeline. When Sir Francis Drake visits the colony after a year, he brings both hope and passage. Most of the settlers return to England, hearts heavy with unmet expectation. Still, the dream does not die. A second expedition follows in 1587, this one led by Governor John White, a gentle artist and cartographer. This time families sail westward. Men, women, children, about 115 in all. They are not mere adventurers now, but colonists. They seek not conquest, but home. Among them is White's own daughter, Eleanor Dare. She is heavily pregnant, and within weeks, amid the hush of pine and dune, a child is born, Virginia Dare, the first English baby born in the New World. Her name, like a whisper in history, would echo far beyond her years. Now close your eyes, if they are not already, and picture the little settlement as dusk falls across Roanoke. A few dozen simple homes made of timber and thatch. Wisps of smoke from cooking fires rise to meet the purple sky. The colonists work quietly, wearily. Children chase each other through the reeds. Mothers sing softly while grinding maize. Fathers repair fishing nets or tend small gardens. The ocean hums beyond the trees, calm and eternal. Yet a sense of fragility hangs in the air. They are alone, far from the comfort of English soil, surrounded by unfamiliar sounds, uncertain alliances, and the slow drip of dwindling supplies. Governor White knows the colony cannot survive without resupply. He makes the difficult choice to return to England to petition for support. He promises his daughter, and his granddaughter, he will return swiftly. But fate has other plans. White's departure marks the last time he sees the colony intact. Let your thoughts float with the tide now, soft and slow. Across the wide Atlantic war clouds gather. England is at odds with Spain, and the mighty Spanish Armada threatens every vessel on the sea. White's return voyage is delayed again and again. What was meant to be months turns into 3 long years. Only in 1590 does he finally sail back to Roanoke, and what he finds is silence. The settlement is deserted. No sign of struggle, no sign of life. Homes dismantled, fences disassembled, tools left behind, no bones, no blood. Only a single word carved carefully into a wooden post, Croatoan. The wind was soft that morning, brushing the sails like a mother's hand to her child's brow. The tide rolled out slowly, as if hesitant to carry the ship away from the pale sandbanks of Roanoke Island. And aboard that ship stood Governor John White, his eyes lingering on the thinning silhouettes of the colony he had built, and the family he had left behind. His daughter Eleanor, her gaze steady. His granddaughter, Virginia, wrapped in linen, cradled close to her mother's chest. The promise he whispered before boarding drifted in the breeze like a prayer. I shall return before the seasons turn. As the vessel turned eastward, the Atlantic opened before him, endless, humming, eternal. Beneath the deck, barrels of salted meat and dry biscuit shifted with the swell of waves. Above, gulls cried in the sunlight, yet within White there was only the weight of haste, of duty, and of fear. Back in England he was to gather supplies, more tools, more men, more hope. But the year was 1587, and Europe's horizon was darkening. Let your breath slow, dear listener, as we drift into that chapter of still water and stilled hearts. For history often moves not in moments, but in the long hush between them. Upon his arrival in England, White found not the bustle of preparation, but the stillness of a nation on edge. Spain, the great sea empire, was stirring. The Spanish Armada, immense and thundering, loomed on the minds of every admiral, every shipbuilder, every court. Queen Elizabeth had recalled her vessels. No ship, none but those destined for war, would leave English shores. White pleaded. But his cause was a quiet one, a colony of 100, a whisper against the roar of coming battle. And so he waited. Let us now imagine Governor White, not as a name in a dusty textbook, but as a man, weathered, tired, with ink-stained fingers tracing maps by candlelight. Each night he wondered, did the harvest fail? Did peace hold with the tribes? Did his daughter sing lullabies over Virginia's cradle? Weeks turned to months, seasons blurred. He tried once more in 1588, secured passage with privateers, but again they were forced back, caught in storms and the wrath of Spanish gunboats. The war with Spain was no passing storm. It was thunder stretched across years. By the time the Armada was finally repelled, it was 1590. 3 years gone. And then, at last, a ship. Supplies were loaded, the wind returned. White sailed once more toward the colony. The sea was quieter now, reflecting skies heavy with summer. He leaned against the railing and let his eyes follow the gulls. He imagined Eleanor waiting at the shore, her hair swept back by wind. He imagined Virginia running barefoot through dune grass, laughing with the same joy he had once painted in watercolours. The journey was long, but the heart makes its own measure of time. Finally they neared Roanoke. It was August. The trees still whispered, the dunes still shimmered, but as they dropped anchor and rowed ashore, there was no smoke rising. No voices, no footsteps in the sand, just wind, just birds, just stillness. White walked among the ruins with silence clinging to his boots. The houses had been taken down, not burned, not broken, removed as if by careful hands. No graves, no signs of struggle, just the palisade, its wood now weathered, carved with a single word, Croatoan. Nearby on a tree trunk the same word, Croatoan, no cross, no distress signal. No clue but this name. White recognised it. Croatoan Island lay some distance to the south, home to a friendly tribe. Perhaps they had moved there, for safety, for kinship, for survival. but storms turned against them again. The ship's captain, growing uneasy, refused to linger, and so, without even the chance to search, Governor White was taken from Roanoke once more, this time forever. And so we are left, dear listener, with a shoreline washed clean, a colony vanished, a word etched in bark, and a grandfather who returned too late. Let that echo carry you gently into rest now. Let the wind in the pines and the hush of history cradle your dreams. The mystery deepens, but our journey continues in the next chapter. In the early mornings, when the mist would rise off the sound like breath from the earth itself, two peoples walked beneath the same sky. One, new to this land, wrapped in wool and wary glances. The other, rooted for generations, moving like memory through trees and tide. Here, on this stretch of coast, English settlers and Algonquian-speaking tribes met, not as enemies, nor yet as friends, but as two stories, uncertain of how to be told together. Let us walk slowly now, into that soft space between fire and fog, where first greetings echoed not with words, but with gestures. When Governor White's group arrived in 1587, they came not with soldiers, but with families, with children, with homes in their hearts, and the Croatoan people, already known from earlier visits, remembered the white-skinned strangers. Chief Manteo came forward again. He was calm, curious, open, and so a fire was built. Fish were roasted, corn was passed hand to hand, beads changed owners, so did laughter, and around that shared flame for a time there was peace. The settlers marvelled at the woven garments of the natives, so light and practical. The natives, in turn, examined the heavy leather and odd metal clasps of the English. One settler sketched in his book a native child chasing a dog, a mother planting squash, a warrior with eagle feathers braided in his hair. The Croatoan watched the settlers build their small fort, strange tools, loud hammers, new ways, but still they exchanged, still they met. Yet, dear listener, peace is a fragile thread, and in the fog between two worlds, misunderstandings can grow quietly. A gesture, meant in kindness, might be mistaken for insult. A gift unreturned, a look held too long, a field wandered into without asking. Small things. But in unfamiliar soil, small things grow quickly. Other tribes, like the Secotan, watched the English with less warmth. Stories had reached them of raids, of disease, of lands taken, and among the settlers whispers of mistrust also stirred. Why had their previous colony struggled? Why had some men disappeared? Each group feared what they could not name, and slowly, subtly, the fire that once warmed began to dim. There were days when nothing went wrong. Children still played. Elders still offered guidance. But the air felt different, charged with something unsaid. One morning a goat wandered from the English fort. It trampled a few young bean plants in a native field. No one saw it happen, but the damage was real. That night, voices rose, tempers flared. The settlers apologised, but the mistrust had already taken root. The fog had returned. Still, Manteo remained. He walked between the worlds, a translator, a symbol. He guided the English when he could. He warned them when he must, and for this the settlers named him Lord of Roanoke, an English title for a man of two homelands. Yet titles do not mend broken branches. Now imagine the wind rising through the trees as dusk falls. Two fires burn, one in the English camp, one in the Croatoan village. Smoke rises to the same stars, but the silence between them grows. Not anger, not violence, just space, just uncertainty. And in that quiet space the seeds of disappearance were sown. Let your eyes rest now as the stars wheel gently above Roanoke Island. Two worlds tried to meet here, and for a fleeting moment, they did. But like fire meeting fog, they warmed, then faded. The journey from Roanoke back to England was long, but filled with purpose. Governor John White stood at the prow of the ship, the wind in his coat, his eyes steady on the horizon. Behind him, the colony waited, His daughter, Eleanor, had watched him go with quiet strength. His granddaughter, Virginia, had cooed in the warm cradle of her arms. He had promised, "I will return, soon, with help, with everything we need." The waves rolled gently beneath the hull, but the sea ahead was far less certain. Upon arriving in England in late 1587, White moved swiftly. He carried letters, requests, pleas. His words painted Roanoke as hopeful, not desperate, but he knew better. The settlers had little food, no fortification, no reinforcement. They needed ships, men, supplies. They needed him. Yet as he stood before merchants and naval officers, the world outside was shifting like a storm. Spain, mighty Spain, was stirring. The air crackled with rumours of war, whispers of sails, dark and many, preparing to cross the Channel. The Queen, Elizabeth I, responded with caution. She called home every available ship. No vessel was to leave English ports without royal approval. England would defend herself. And John White's mission to return to Roanoke was put to silence. Let your mind rest now, as we drift through time, through ink-stained days and candlelit nights. White remained in London. He wrote again. He waited. He watched the harbours. He listened to the sea breeze through stone arches, and he thought of Eleanor, of Virginia, of the settlers rising with each sun to face hunger and fear without him. In the spring of 1588, White found a chance. 2 small vessels, privately owned. He made arrangements, loaded supplies, and set sail with renewed hope. But fate, once again, turned. The ships were attacked. Pirates, angry seas, confusion. They returned to port battered, their mission failed. White's hands trembled as he unpacked unopened crates. The months stretched on. The Spanish Armada gathered its strength, and when the battle finally came, cannons thundering across the waves, it was as if time itself held its breath. By autumn the Armada had been defeated. England rejoiced, but John White's joy was quiet, distant, for he had lost another year. The year turned to 1589. He kept writing, he kept waiting. The colonists, his family, had now been without word for 2 full winters, and still, he did not give up. Finally, in 1590, he was granted passage aboard an English privateering vessel. Its primary mission was not rescue, but profit. Still, he took what he could. The ship carved through the waves. Wind pressed its sails. White stood again at the bow, 3 years older, thin from worry, weathered from waiting. His heart was heavy, but it still held hope. Let us imagine him now, watching the sea. In his hand, a letter he had written but never sent. To Eleanor, "My child, not a day has passed that I have not dreamed of your face, of Virginia's laughter in the reeds. I come for you, as I said I would. And though the sea has stolen years from me, I carry your names with each breath. Be safe, I am near." That letter was never read, because when White reached Roanoke, there was no one left to read it. The ship anchored just offshore, its sails heavy with stillness. John White stood alone at the bow, his hands resting on the worn wood rail, eyes fixed on the tree-lined curve of Roanoke Island. He had returned, but it did not feel like homecoming. The shore was quiet, too quiet. No smoke curled from cook fires. No one waited at the edge of the forest. The breeze, soft and salty, brought no laughter, no sound of life, only the slow rhythmic breath of waves upon the sand. The small landing boat touched land, and White stepped out, boots sinking gently into the sand. The island greeted him not with voices, but with stillness. Bird song above, leaves rustling in the trees, and beneath it all silence. A silence so deep it hummed in his chest. He walked slowly, his eyes scanning the familiar path toward the settlement. The same trail he had left behind, but now overgrown with vines and bramble. When he reached the site, his heart seemed to still. The fort was gone. There were no bodies, no broken doors, no signs of fire or violence. The houses had been taken down, not destroyed but carefully dismantled, as if the settlers had planned to move. The gardens had gone wild, pumpkins rotted in the shade, herbs stood untended, dried by wind and sun. A rusted spade lay in the grass. A child's doll sat beneath a window, half covered in dust and petals. Life had once breathed here. He could feel it. But now it was only echoes. And then he saw it. Etched into the wood of a gatepost, the letters stood stark and plain. Croatoan. No blood, no distress, no frantic message. Just a word. One word. A name. White's breath caught. Croatoan. He whispered it aloud, and it seemed to vanish into the wind. Croatoan was an island south of Roanoke, home to allies, home to Manteu's people. Could the colonists have gone there? Was it a sign of survival, or a farewell? He searched for more, another carving on a nearby tree. The same word, but no cross, no signal of danger. Just that word, like a message cast into a bottle and left for the sea. White's knees lowered to the ground. He placed a hand gently against the bark as if it could tell him more, as if it could whisper the truth. His heart was heavy. His mind raced. But around him, the forest only swayed softly. Days passed as White and the crew searched, but storms gathered on the horizon, and the ship's captain grew uneasy. They could not sail to Croatoan, not this time, not now. And so, once again, John White was taken from the island, this time with no family to wave goodbye, and no promise he could make. He left with questions, and silence, and a single word carved into wood. The story of Roanoke was not just a tale of people, it is also a story of wind and water, of storms and silence, of kings and countries, and choices made far from the land where whispers vanished into trees. Tonight we drift into the unseen forces that shape the fate of the Lost Colony, quietly, steadily, without warning. Let us begin with the skies. For the years between 1587 and 1590 were marked by strange patterns. Historians studying the ancient rings of Carolina's trees found scars, rings narrowed by drought. The soil, once rich and pliant, had turned to dust. Rivers thinned, crops shriveled beneath the weight of sun. The colonists had arrived with hope, but the land had offered hardship, and when rain did fall, it came not gently, but in sheets, carried by storms that howled through the island with no regard for shelter or dreams. Imagine them now, those settlers, huddled inside wooden walls as thunder rolled above. Their fires dimmed, their food stores dwindled, and outside, the land gave little in return. The native tribes too felt the drought, and where water wanes, tensions often rise. Food that might have been traded became too precious. Trust that once flowed freely, slowed. These hardships, written not in ink but in cracked earth and dry air, crept silently into the settlers' lives. They did not arrive with a shout, but with a hush. Now let us turn our eyes eastward across the sea. To the court of Queen Elizabeth and the troubled waters of Europe, the Spanish Armada, the pride of Catholic Spain, was gathering like a storm cloud over the Channel. In 1588 it came, hundreds of ships, thousands of soldiers, their target England. England responded with fire and fear. Every ship, every sword, every ounce of attention turned towards survival. And so, John White's mission to return to Roanoke was no longer a priority. Even as the colony waited, even as hope waned across the Atlantic, the war had no cannon on Roanoke, but its silence echoed there. Wars are often fought far away from those they affect most. The settlers, cut off from England, felt the absence. No new supplies, no ships on the horizon, only the endless rustle of trees and surf. They had to decide, stay and starve, or move and try to live. It is possible, dear listener, that war and weather joined hands, and quietly erased Roanoke. Not with swords, not with fire, but with long hunger and longer silence. Close your eyes now. Can you hear the rain that never came? The message never delivered? The farewell never spoken? These were forces beyond the reach of hammers or prayers. And so Roanoke faded, not in a single night, but slowly, gently, like footprints in sand. There are mysteries in the world that do not ask to be solved, only remembered, only wondered at. The story of Roanoke is one such mystery, and while no answer has ever emerged from the fog with certainty, there are whispers, soft theories, that drift through time like candlelight through mist. Tonight, we walk quietly among them. Let us begin with the gentlest possibility. 1. They stayed, but not alone. Some believe the colonists did not vanish, but were welcomed. That, facing hunger and isolation, they turned to those who had always known the land, the indigenous tribes. The Croatoan, the Secatan, and others may have offered shelter, food, a place in their world. Perhaps the settlers laid down their English ways, learned new words, took new names, and slowly, gently, their colony became a memory. Some reports from later explorers told of native villages where blue-eyed children played, where English tools were used. Were these echoes of Roanoke? Perhaps. 2. The hand of Spain. Far to the south, Spain held its own footholds in the New World. Spanish forts, Spanish flags, Spanish eyes on the horizon. Some have wondered. Did a Spanish ship come north? Did soldiers find the English and see them as enemies? We have no record, no battle, no grave. But the sea holds many secrets, and not all of them speak. 3. They moved to live. Another theory drifts in on the breeze. Relocation. What if the settlers simply left? Moved inland, or to Croatoan Island, chasing fresher water, safer ground? Governor White found no distress sign, no cross-etched, no sign of attack. Just the word Croatoan. Maybe it was a message. Maybe they survived, just elsewhere. But if so, no trace was ever found. They moved and disappeared. 4. Illness in the shadows. Some believe it was not people, but plague. Sickness can move quietly through villages, as silent as mist, as swift as nightfall, with no doctor, no medicine, a fever, a cough, a wasting. In such an isolated place, illness could mean the end, and the forest, in time, would reclaim what was left. 5. Things we cannot name. And then, there are the stories, of spirits in the trees, of curses, of spirits in the trees, of curses, of time bending strangely on Roanoke's shores. Some say the colony was taken, not by men or weather, but by something older. A rift, a mystery, a silence with shape. These are not facts. But sometimes stories carry a kind of truth that facts cannot hold. They remind us to listen, to wonder, to remember. Some stories do not live in books. They live in the hush of leaves, in the drift of mist across moonlit waters, in the spaces between what was and what might still be. Roanoke is such a story, and though the colony may be gone, it has never truly left. The island itself seems to remember. At twilight, when the trees stand tall like sentinels, and the sky bleeds lavender into the sea, there are whispers, soft as silk, carried on the salt-laced wind. Locals tell of figures seen between the pines, not frightening, just watching. Still, pale, wrapped in the scent of cedar and the quiet of centuries. Some say it is the settlers, others say it is those who came before them, and sometimes, just as darkness settles, a light flickers in the forest. Not fire, not torch, just a pulse of golden glow, too bright to be moonlight, too still to be storm. Fishermen have seen it on the far side of the sound. They say it dances, then vanishes. No sound, no reason, just light. As if something long forgotten still walks the shore. There are voices too, so they say. A child's giggle, high and fleeting. A woman's hum, soft and low. Heard where no one stands, not cruel, not cold, just echoes. Perhaps Virginia Dare, forever 3 years old, forever chasing butterflies through dune grass only she can see. there is one story told with reverence. It speaks of a man, an old man in buckled shoes, seen walking a narrow path through the woods. He does not speak. He only pauses, places a hand on the bark of a tree, then vanishes like morning fog. Some believe it is John White, still searching, still hoping, still waiting for a colony that never calls back. And then there are the dreams. Visitors have described them. Vivid, strange. Of bonfires that burn blue, of faces half lit in shadow, of words whispered in tongues long lost. They wake with sand in their shoes, with names in their mind that they do not know. No tale has proof, no tale has end. But the stories continue, passed from mouth to mouth, like lullabies with no origin. And perhaps that is the answer. Perhaps Roanoke was never meant to be solved, only sung, only dreamed. Some endings are not lines drawn, but ripples fading. Echoes that stretch across water, then still. And so it is with Roanoke, not a closed book, but an open sea. We have wandered the winding paths of pine and tide. We have traced the footprints of settlers and the shadows of their fears. We have listened to the wind speak their names, Eleanor, Virginia, Manteo, and still. The story remains incomplete. But perhaps, in that incompletion, we find something greater, a quiet truth. That not all things must be known, some must simply be. The colony of Roanoke is gone, its walls dismantled, its fires long cold, its people like smoke carried into time, and yet it endures. Not in bricks, but in wonder. Close your eyes now, dear listener, and let your mind float like driftwood. Let the images come gently. A canoe gliding across still waters at dawn. Children laughing near the reeds. A father teaching his son to fish by starlight. A mother singing a lullaby that never reached its end. Can you see them? Can you feel the hush between the trees? That is where they live now. Not lost, but remembered. There will always be questions, and that is the beauty of it. Mystery does not need solving to be meaningful. Some stories are meant to rest in silence, to rock us to sleep, to remind us that history is not only in answers, but in awe. So let Roanoke drift into your dreams now. Let it settle like mist over water. Let it fade, not in sorrow, but in peace. And as your breath slows, as your thoughts quiet, know this: they are not gone, not truly. They walk in stories, they speak in pines, they wait gently in the stillness.